let's talk about the House, what Trump has
Yeah,
been pressuring Republicans in Texas to do. The Democratic state legislators, take off
yeah,
and go
yeah,
to Illinois and elsewhere. So, if this ends up being an all-out gerrymandering war, some of the analysis that I've read indicates Democrats actually have more to lose from
yeah.
that than Republicans do. Do you concur with that
Yes,
assessment?
yes, absolutely. So I wrote about that today. So, the current, if every state can be convinced to squeeze out every possible seat, there are probably, in the end, a half a dozen more, four or five, six more Republican seats that Republicans can gain than Democrats can gain. I mean, Democrats can gain five in California. And if I had to bet, if Texas goes ahead and California puts this on the ballot, voters will approve it. I'm interested in your opinion. And they might be able to neutralize five and five. But then you've got Florida, you got Ohio, you got Missouri. Indiana, they seem to be balking, interestingly. And where do Democrats go next? I mean, they might be able to get a little more out of Illinois, maybe the last Republican seat in Maryland. New York, because of the way their constitution works, they probably can't do this till 28, although someone told me yesterday they're trying to find a way to do some more in 26. The answer is that yes, Republicans can squeeze out more seats than Democrats. Um, Probably not enough to make a difference if there is a substantial, wave. Certainly not enough to make a difference if there's a substantial wave. But we are now, Larry, in the past three sessions, right? Past three Congresses, the majority for the majority party has been 10 seats or less. That's never happened in American history. We've never had three Congresses in a row with a majority of 10 seats or less. And the reason it's so small now is because the outliers have basically been purged. I mean, in that 94 and 2010 elections that we talked about, the Democratic blue dogs in rural blue collar areas were hunted virtually to extinction. And then in that 28 midterm that I mentioned, the white collar Republicans surviving in suburban districts were not hunted to extinction, but were severely diminished. They're on the Endangered Species Act. They've applied, they've qualified for the Endangered Species Act.
Hi, I'm Pat Morrison, one of the hosts of America at a Crossroads. If you like this video, don't just watch. Head over to our website where you can subscribe for early access to new programs, see our upcoming schedules, and connect directly with our guests in our weekly live streams. Thank you for watching.
The downside of this too, I think for the democracy is it means that people who are members of the minority party in whatever state they live in are
Yeah,
essentially going to be unrepresented. So if we care about
disenfranchised.
democracy and people being represented, and almost no Republicans in California are represented, or Democrats are largely shut out in
You
Texas, this
know,
is a big deal.
It is. I wrote about this today, Larry, in my Bloomberg column, and inadvertently, it's really inadvertently, the 2020 maps, post 2020 maps, ended up producing district lines that all of the experts who study this, Sam Wang at Princeton, Nicholas Stephanopoulos at the Harvard Election Law Clinic, they will tell you the maps right now are pretty neutral. Unlike post 1980 and 1990, where Democrats were able to gerrymander because they still control all the South at that point, or post 2010, where Republicans are really gerrymandered. 2020, both sides kind of, tilted the maps in their favor where they could, but it largely netted out and it evened out. And so the expectation is that whichever side wins the most popular votes in the House is probably going to have the majority before we started this. The flaw in the current maps was that there's virtually no competition. Like both sides have created a lot more safe seats, especially Republicans. The Republican states, only 8 of 184 seats drawn by Republican control map makers in 24 were decided by 5 points or less. Only 8 of 184. And it's only 37 nationwide. And if we go down this road, the likelihood is that not only will you see less representation for the minority party in all of these states, you'll also see less competition. This is really a moment to pull back from the brink. I mean, you can go through this incredibly arduous and polarizing and contested process and maybe end up with five more Republican seats than when you started. I mean, we would be better off if both sides said, okay, let's walk back. Let's set some national standards. Let's ban mid-decade redistricting. By the way, did you see JD Vance on Fox last Sunday? He said, we want to redo the 2020 census. He did not say whether they want to redo the 2020 census before 2030, but he certainly left open that possibility, as has Trump.
Well,
And they may seek to try to not only redistrict, but reapportion before 2030 to shift electoral college and votes and House seats out of California, New York, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and into Texas, Florida, Utah, and Arizona. So that is something else to keep an eye on. I
well,
mean,
and wasn't it the president himself who said, if I'm not mistaken, that undocumented residents should not be counted in
yeah.
the census? Well, and of course, for states like California with large numbers of undocumented residents, that would have a huge impact. But I thought there were court decisions that pretty clearly laid out that undocumented residents had a right to be represented in the census and politically, even though they can't vote.
Well, first of all, the 14th Amendment specifically said apportionment should be based on the whole number of persons in each state. So, we have a Supreme Court that's been very creative, but that is a lot to get around to exclude undocumented immigrants. By the way, I talked to a guy this week a University of Minnesota sociologist, who, with a colleague from the Migration Policy Institute, ran the numbers before Trump even won on what would have happened if you excluded the undocumented from the 2020 census. What would have happened to apportionment? And their conclusion was a wash. Texas would lose a seat. Ohio would lose a seat. Texas and California would each lose a seat, and Ohio and New York would each gain a seat. Where the impact could be greater is in what we're watching now within states, where the essence of the redistricting that's happening in Texas and is on tap in Florida and other states is to diminish representation in the big metro areas that are actually driving all the population growth in these states, and to crack the metro areas into these pie-shaped districts where the metros are overwhelmed by white rural Republicans. So if you exclude undocumented from the population count of a state, it gets easier to minimize the clout of the metro centers in that state and to shift power, and for that matter, federal funding toward the rural areas. And I think, people I talked to this week said, yeah, you can bet we're going to be in court. And you can bet that, Rob Bonta is probably going to have to be in court before 2028 and maybe even 2026 when Trump's Commerce Secretary announces that they are excluding the undocumented from the
California Attorney General. Next week, Wednesday, of course, 5 o'clock Pacific time, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel and national security expert Alexander Vindman will be in conversation with Madeline Brand. They're going to be talking about Russia and Ukraine. So until next week, from all of us at America at a Crossroads, thank you so much for joining us.